it is a very particular aesthetic, right? To have 8-bit or entirely not even just electronic based, but such retro electronic based music. Do you Why do you think people have an attachment to that? Do you think it's partially out of like or entirely out of nostalgia? Do you think it's because uh, do you think people just find it a fun experiment? Like, why do you think people might be attached to that aesthetic?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons. Like you say, nostalgia is definitely one. People who grew up with those games kind of are so used to the sound as like its own thing that to
Right.
hear kind of like music that was never intended to sound like it, kind of take them back to that time is, it can be a fun experience, can be
Sure.
interesting. I think another one is that I always get comments, people saying like, oh, the song sounds cute. And, so
Right.
people just like, cute sounding songs.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess another reason as well would be just like just to see how they did it. Like, oh,
Sure.
this song from, uh, well, actually, no, that's. I was about to say the one I just uploaded to Sparkman, but that's actually the other way because I took an 8-bit and made it 16-bit.
Right.
But yeah, just like I could tell you what. So like, I uploaded Secret of the Forest Chrono Trigger previous to the one I just did.
Right.
Someone might be like, okay, that's a really kind of slow, kind of like ambient song. How did they do it? So it's kind of like, I guess a mix of like intrigue, kind of like cute sounds, and
Right.
kind of like nostalgia as well.
Yeah.
And I suppose as well, just like other musicians can kind of like appreciate the project as a whole and just be
Right.
like, okay, like it's
Yeah.
a good cover, it's a good remix.
Yeah.
I like that.
I imagine like a lot of peers see something like that and they understand exactly what kind of work goes into it as well. And I imagine that makes it more appreciable too.
Mm.
But I think also I imagine some people also just get kind of a comfort from hearing something from their childhood, even though they're not hearing something they heard from their childhood, but just having that theme and unity, it kind of like takes you back to another other years when things were simpler or whatnot. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
One in particular, one of the first ones I found on your channel was your Pikmin's Forest of Hope one, and I remember playing that growing up and hearing this music that I'm already nostalgic for, but in a form that I also remember, but just not that exact form.
Mm.
There's something so comforting about it, right? It almost puts you at peace because it reminds you of when you didn't have all these worries to worry about as a kid, And
Yeah, yeah.
I imagine that's got to be at least part of it for a lot of people. But
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, yeah. Funny you mentioned that one because that was actually a commission from a friend to be played during.
a
It
wedding
was either
proposal, I believe,
yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
yeah. It was. Did I put it in the description? I
you
must
did.
have done.
And I'm
Okay,
not
all
trying
right.
to
Yeah.
pretend that I read every description of yours. I think I just happened to read that
I
one.
mean,
So
you do more than most then if you read the description.
when you're remixing these songs from games, do you ever feel if you ever felt like emotionally attached to the pieces, sorry, from the games themselves, or is it just because you're a musician and because you've broken it all down in your head, you almost feel less attachment to the emotional side, possibly?
Good question. Once again, it would probably depend on the song itself.
Sure,
I would never work on a song that I didn't like for a start.
sure,
That's like, I'm not going to just like do a track because it's popular or it's
right,
like the current trend right now.
right,
Like I have to have some sort of attachment to it. And usually that's either, it's a new game that I'm interested in,
right.
um, or it's like a game that I've played in the past, or, something like that. But I wouldn't say like emotionally attached, probably not. No, but like I say, I'm probably a bit of a unique case. There might be a few songs like I can't think of off the top of my head that kind of like I really wanted to do.
Right.
But over the years, I've definitely kind of been a bit more objective about my
Sure.
decision making,
Right.
and kind of being like, okay, I really, really like this song,
Right.
but is it going to be a good video to put out? There's got to be some sort of balance between like doing what will work and doing what I want. Because like
Right.
if you go too far in either direction, then like you know, it could be like unrewarding in different ways. And
Sure.
for me, like if I just did like songs that like I really really liked and I had a strong emotional attachment to, but like they're from games that like no one played, because I like a lot of kind of like unique and not unique but like niche games, let's say.
Sure.
I think actually Diddy Kong Racing is a good example of that. That's like my first, second, third favorite game ever, and I love the soundtrack. But I know that it's not like super niche, but it's like
Right.
it's not like super popular. So I know that if I do that, it might, I wouldn't say wasted time, but it might kind of feel like that, because I know it's not going to get the reception that I kind of feel about it.
Sure.
If you get what I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
So I like yeah, Diddy Kong Racing is a good example of like a game that you know, a lot of people might remember super fondly, and when they hear music from it, it reminds them of those like fond times or whatnot. And you know, like you got like a Metroid Prime poster in your room, right?
Yeah.
Like that's one of those games where when I re-listen to soundtrack from that game, it kind of reawakens that emotion that I originally had for it. But that could be because I don't have a musical background. You know, I've never looked at the sheet music of it. I've never deconstructed it into channels and stuff like that. So I still kind of see it as this weird, untouchable nebula, right? And I'm curious if that's why maybe myself and other people get so attached to these pieces, while for you, because you're educated in the field and whatnot, it's easier to just see it as notes and channels and stuff, while also appreciating it, obviously. You obviously appreciate the music, but...
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of way you put that, actually, because like even just mentioning Metroid Prime, I do remember, you know, obviously I played the game back in the day. There was a huge period where I didn't think about it at all, obviously. And, you know, so well, I remember just actually one day kind of just like listening to the soundtrack, and I listened to Talon 4, I think is the planet's name, like when you first land on that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember just listening to that, and I did have some sort of like emotional reaction to it, because I was like, man, this is bringing me back, and it sounds great.
Right.
But as you were kind of explaining that thought, I was like, I sometimes have those thoughts to the original songs, but when I listen to like my own remixes and like other 8-bit remixes, I don't, because I guess I kind of tend to associate that genre of music with like work,
right,
instead of like kind of like experiences,
right?
If that makes sense.
Yes, that does make sense.
Yes, that's probably the best way I would explain it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, then, kind of on that topic, then, of work and seeing your pieces different as like the original and stuff like that. Hey there. You just watched a clip from my creative podcast. If you'd like to check out the full episode as well as other episodes as soon as they come out, you can support me over on Patreon for the $3 tier, or you can just subscribe here and wait for clips and podcast episodes to come out eventually.